Welcome once again to another version of Tax Watch, brought to you by the concerned taxpayers of Duval County in cooperation with Comcast Television. Comcast makes this time available to us so that we can bring you information about local government, what the mayor and executive branch and how the legislative branch, the city council, wants to spend your tax dollars. We try to keep you up on the legislation and all these particulars, especially those of interest that we think we question as whether they're appropriate use of your tax dollars. I'm Tony Bates. I'm going to be your host for today's show, and with me to help go over some of these issues, which we're going to talk about. We're trying to get to JEDC and economic development, corporate welfare. We even come up with a new group now, the developer welfare. We're trying and get to issues such as that. Maybe we might get into redistricting. We got a new election day change issue. We got a lot of topics we're going to try and make you aware of. And with me to help me with this is one of our past presidents, John Winkler, and he's also a member of our board of directors now, and he's just been a very active member. He was a vice president for me for 3 years, my right-hand man for many years, which I appreciated John. John's a graduate of Princeton University, and he got a master's, I guess it's a master's degree in taxes and law or something from the University of Florida. I'm not sure what all that. You might want to elaborate on that. And he practices civil law here in Jacksonville. And John was also vice president of the League of Women Voters, which I don't quite understand. John, vice president of the League of Women Voters, but anyway, that's how it is. And he was also our candidate committee chairman last year when concerned taxpayers brought out for the first time their voter's guide that we brought to you with all the information about all the candidates and our endorsement. This was a new product for us, and if you remember it, that was our inaugural issue, and John was the committee chairman of this project, and he and our, at that time, President Victor Wilhelm were the ramrods about this project. John, it was a great project, and I appreciate the effort that you two guys put into that, and you especially as the committee chair. And also with me, John will be back in a minute, but I want to go over to introduce another of our guests who is I call her our legislative watchdog. She's done a terrific job. Her name is Connie Benham. Connie's just one of you. She's a housewife. She's been married 23 years, and she's got a couple of children, a boy, I guess a young man, 15, and a young lady, 11. And she got involved with, I'll let her tell you about that in just a minute, with oversight of government. She's done a good job. We've had about 3 what we call pretty good watchdogs. Rod Morrill, one of our chairmen, has been active in doing that. And then there was Don Holder, who did a great, terrific job for us. And my gosh, here comes along Connie Benham, who got excited about this type of work, and she's just done such a tremendous job for her. She's even earned the title of Public Warrior now. Connie, welcome to the show, your inaugural visit with us here on Concerned Taxpayers Tax Watch. What brought you to the public forum and activism, or the Public Warrior title?
Well, it's been about a year now. I celebrated my anniversary. What brought me into the process was last year when they decided to raise the taxes on our millage rates. And this was in order to keep the status quo of spend, spend, spend. So when they decided to continue spending without cutting is when I decided to join the fray in trying to stop the waste and abuse of our taxpayer money.
And Connie, ever since then, is just a figure around City Hall. She's right there making sure the legislators know what they're supposed to know, what they don't know, she lets them know, and she lets us know about the things that we ought to be interested in, so she does a terrific job. And Connie, while I've got you here, I know you've done some work, and John has some thoughts about this too. There's a recent bill that Councilman Matt Schellenberg has introduced about changing the election dates. Could you, the days that we hold our citywide elections, could you elaborate on that a little bit for us?
Well, this right here is another reintroduction of a law that the taxpayers have already discarded. It's a law that they want to go ahead and, in an attempt to try and save money, we want to move our local law, our local elections, to the federal days that we make all the federal and national decisions. But most of the people have already voted this down, saying that this is wrong because it takes away all the focus from our local issues. And it's very important that we keep the focus on our local issues. Too many people would end up going to the polls only being informed on some of the national and not really informed on the local issues. And the taxpayers have already said no, they don't want to change our local voting.
Yeah, John, you got some other reasons too, like the accessibility for the public to be able to get a candidate's story out and elaborate on maybe a little of the history of what's happened before, and are we in favor of, and why did Schellenberg, some of the reasons he thought he wanted to move this? You got any other?
Well, the valid reason to move the elections from the spring to the fall, and this was a component of Jack Webb's bill that he had proposed that was on the ballot last year, is to enable City Council to have another 6 months to consider a full budget cycle. The way it is right now, when an incoming administration takes office on July 1st, the mayor's office has 2 weeks to come up with a proposed budget, which has to be in the hands of the council by the 15th of July. And we discovered that basically what that means is that you're using, the incoming administration has to use figures that are put together by the previous administration. So you're relying on cooperation between two administrations that may not necessarily see eye to eye on what the budget process ought to be about. So in that sense, yes, I appreciate that Schellenberg, like Webb, is attempting to add time to that process for the benefit of City Council and everybody who is involved in the budgeting process. The problem here is that, unlike Webb's bill, which would have moved the elections to an odd year in between the state elections, the state gubernatorial election, and the federal presidential election, this bill would match us up with the state gubernatorial, U.S. Senate races, and congressional races. By doing that, I certainly found in running for local office during the presidential campaign that all of the oxygen is sucked out of the room when it comes to the down ballot races. When you have statewide or national races that are going on, the media pays no attention to the local races. It is incredibly difficult to get any kind of airtime or what they call earned media, even if you have real issues that involve that. So, and even on the ballot itself, physically on the ballot, when you're talking about coming into a multi-page ballot, it's very difficult. I would find it sad to have our mayor's race turning up as like the seventh item on a ballot rather than being the top of the ballot. And I think that this last mayoral election in the spring told us just how important it is that the whole focus be on that one election cycle. So, notwithstanding the fact that Jerry Holland, the supervisor of elections, and presumably Mr. Schellenberg are looking to save a couple $1 million on a cycle, democracy does cost something, and I think that it's very important that if you take even $3 million and schedule it out over a 4-year cycle, that's $750,000 a year. I think that while that is an expense, obviously, that from my view at least, that's one that's well worth our incurring in order to preserve attention on local issues. It's hard enough as it is to get people to pay attention, and it just becomes that much more difficult when the national media and all the rest of the local media are directing you away from it.
It's a justifiable expense.
Absolutely.
Right.
All right, so I think what we need to do now is probably encourage you to call maybe Matt Schellenberg. I've had a conversation with him, and he was willing to listen and heard some of the reasons that we have given here. I think he's right. We think he's right in changing to the fall of the year. The bill was for the public before, but the public didn't understand what the real change was. So we would encourage you to maybe call Councilman Matt Schellenberg. We'll provide some of that information on our webpage, or if you want to, you can contact me about any of these issues, Tony Bates at juno.com, and just write help or info, that you want help or info, and I'll send the info to you. But contact Schellenberg, because we think it's important to separate these local issues and keep them separate so that we can concentrate on the local issues. Now, there was another thing. Let's talk about this too. There is the discussion that when you have these national elections, that you're going to turn out, maybe 50% of the voters, where if we just have the local election, it winds up with maybe 25% of the voters. Is there an issue about at least the people of the 25% that do vote? They vote because they are informed about the local issues and they want to be there and discuss local issues, where maybe when you get to 50%, the rest of those people really aren't involved in local issues. Is that a valid reason to justify, even though there's a lower turnout, that it still might be worth keeping them separate?
Absolutely. One of the problems with having municipal elections that are partisan elections, like the ones we have here, where we have Democrat or Republican or Libertarian or whatever designated after the candidates' names, is that there are people who will go out and who will vote based strictly on party when they may not actually even agree necessarily with the philosophy, independent philosophy of that particular candidate. And that is exacerbated when you have these elections associated with national and state elections, because the people that come in and let's admit it, there are plenty of them, vote straight ticket, are going to go through and vote straight ticket on their local officials as well, without necessarily giving it any thought whatsoever. So the only way that you could possibly get around that, the only way that I think that you could possibly justify a change that associates those elections would be to also make our elections nonpartisan. Now, that's not part of this proposal, and that's not even something that I've heard discussed. But if in fact they were willing to consider making those elections nonpartisan, so that only the people who had at least an inkling about what they were voting for might vote. Although again, who knows? They might vote for people based on how long their name is. I don't know.
Or where they are on the list.
Yeah, I know there were certainly people who voted for Connie Mack for Senate because they thought that he was a woman. So what can I tell you?
Anything else that you need to add to that, or we got it pretty well covered?
I think we covered it.
Okay, so get a pen and pencil, and later on we'll give you contact information, because we need this. This would also, even though if it gets through council, it would be a ballot issue that you would have to vote on it later at some time anyway. So keep that in mind and get your pen and pencil so you can write down some contact information we'll give you at the end of the program.
And let me just say that obviously our board, Concerned Taxpayers of Duval County, has voted to oppose the current bill the way it's proposed by Mr. Schellenberg.
Yeah, we would encourage the councilman to substitute the old Jack Webb bill. I think would be, it seemed like that was a pretty good bill, so that would be our position right now. So we'd encourage you to try and influence the council person in that way, or your council people, whoever your council person is, to affect their vote. Okay, let's try and move maybe into, we're going to try and get to the corporate welfare issue. Before we get there, I want to introduce you to another issue, which now we call what we titled the developer welfare. Connie, can you elaborate on that a little bit for us?
Well, there's two issues right now on the agenda. One is for waiving concurrency, and one is waiving mobility. What it is it's the ability to give the developers free rein, taxpayer-covered improvements for road infrastructure. It is for the sewers, the fresh water, the sidewalks, everything that the developers are supposed to be accountable for the development of the areas and the houses that they put in. What the city is doing is waiving and giving them free rein, where the taxpayers have to cover that amount of money, which is ultimately welfare for the the developers. And what it is, it's a catch-22, because there's also another bill in our agenda where taxpayers are being asked to cover infrastructure on some of the road repairs and improvements and road widening that should have been covered by the developers years ago. And what we're doing is just continuing to put us deeper in debt, where we will have to continue to borrow money and to cover what the developers are getting for free.
And do you recall how long this moratorium is? Was it a year or 2 years?
It's 1 year.
It's 1 year. So what's your view? Should we, is there a lot of homes out there right now that we need to get off the market and get filled up? A lot of buildings that are vacant need to get, should developers be required to pay for their impact on the infrastructure like they've been doing?
Well, the bogus economic argument is that if all of the taxpayers in the county are bearing this cost, this burden equally, rather than having it concentrated on the developer, who of course is going to recover it from the people that he sells his property to. The bogus argument is that there will be development that there is not presently going on. And frankly, if we look at the surplus of commercial space, we look at the surplus of existing homes on the market in Jacksonville, I don't see this as anything other than fee shifting from the folks that were going to go ahead and build a project anyway to everybody throughout the entire county. And that's really the question here. Should everybody in the county be bearing the burden of these development costs, or should the people that are actually utilizing these facilities by either living there or shopping there or whatever be the ones that are bearing them? Because the money has to be spent in order to bring these places into compliance with state law and local law.
Okay, so we've got another, I guess, entitlement class almost now. The developers are going to get things that they were paying for in the past now are going to be shifted to the everyday taxpayer, because they aren't going to pay for those expenses any longer. So the lobbyists have won again, and I'll talk about that a little bit near the end of the closing of the show. The lobbyists have won again because we weren't there in numbers to try and persuade our council people different. And so we need to get you involved in issues like this, and you need to get upset about issues like this, and you need to be informed about issues like this. And before the end of the show, we'll talk some more about that. Okay, so we covered the new program, developer welfare. Now let's go back to our old standby, corporate welfare, which was the Jacksonville Economic Development Commission. And we've got 2 or 3 now, corporate welfare. We're going to give to big businesses who tons and tons of earnings. Just yesterday, well, yesterday for you who are watching the program now, since it's taped and runs for a month, this would have been October 17th when we were at the Finance Committee meeting. And here comes a big J.P. Morgan. You're familiar with that. Well, here they are wanting some of your money. This big corporation wants some of your big tax money, not to bail them out, but just to give them money to expand. Connie, can you just give us a...
Yeah, I'd be happy to, Tony, on this one. You know, this corporate welfare is an issue that it's a hot issue among a lot of taxpayers. J.P. Morgan has been in business since the early 1800s, and they are by far one of the largest financial institutions in the United States. And they do have a branch here in Jacksonville, and they do. Will be the second time that they've been given corporate welfare, that I can find. And what they're looking for is over $2.5 million of taxpayer blackmail money to keep them here and bring an additional 250 jobs to the area. Now, the JEDC did say that, of course, that the J.P. Morgan was looking in Texas, Florida, and Ohio, of all places, to go ahead and relocate these 250 jobs. The J.P. Morgan representative did say that they already have 2 areas in the South Side that are prepared, and they are prepared to start building and relocating these 250 jobs. They are ready to jump on it as soon as the city agrees and the state agrees. And what it is just this right here is one of the richest financial institutions that we have here in the city, and they want our tax money to help them stay here. And this is just plain wrong.
Well, which they would expand without our tax money, and then maybe we'll get into this relationship, because in the city we'll say, well, it's only 20% of the, we're only going to give a couple of $100,000, but the state money is still our tax money. So just hold on. There's more. John,
well,
we got a couple more.
That's true. I mean, now J.P. Morgan was famous while he was alive as a robber baron, and I guess this is consistent with that reputation. But we have a couple of programs, and they're different from one another. Tyson Foods was going to move a facility here to prepare restaurant meat portions, and they had already decided that the competition was either Jacksonville, which has excellent distribution network qualities. We've got a lot of interstates, we've got trains, we've got what they really need, or any of a number of small towns where the cost of living might be a little lower, but that have none of that infrastructure that they really need in order to make this a distribution point. So the way this came about was that there was an empty warehouse they were going to use. They are now asking for, and apparently are going to receive, $1.2 million to come here, even though, as they put it, it was a done deal. So essentially what we're doing is paying them to come here when they were going to come here anyway. Now, and again, a lot of that is so-called state money, but state money is, of course, our money. Now, the other interesting $3.36 million targeted qualified target industry tax refund program and incentive package is with Blue Cross Blue Shield of Florida. Blue Cross Blue Shield of Florida obviously is here already. This is not an incentive program in order to attract Blue Cross Blue Shield of Florida to Florida. They are located in Jacksonville, have been located in Jacksonville for decades. I don't believe that there was really a competition between other cities in Florida, and if there were, why the state would be paying $2.7 million in order to keep them in one city versus another makes no sense. Here, the city share is only $671,500. But again, you add these programs up and you say to yourself, well, there's nearly $5 million between those two. The city is spending roughly $1 million of that. We as Florida citizens and taxpayers are coming up with the balance of that. What is the rationale behind this? I mean, it's fine to come in and say that by doing this, you use this formula that there are jobs being created, that they pay a certain amount, that you average this over the number of jobs. I'm sorry. I mean, the whole point of this development program ought to be directed, if it's going to do anything, is to those jobs that otherwise would not have come here. And I don't see in either of these cases that there's any inkling of that being the case.
Well, there you go again. Here, the lobbyists win, and we're not hearing from the public. This is why we have to encourage you to get involved. In fact, when we talked about this corporate welfare, Connie, if you remember, do you remember the question that Councilman Crescent-Benny asked the fellow from Ohio?
Mr. Crescent-Benny asked if there were any beaches in Ohio, and next time that he's up there to go ahead and look for those beaches.
Yeah, and so a couple of points were brought out, and you would think that, well, that might make Councilman Crescent-Benny no, but Councilman Crescent-Benny went ahead and voted. There was one no vote. Councilman Yarborough voted against that particular bill. It will be recommended to the council. None of these have been approved by council yet, but they've been in the finance committee and they will be back out soon. So this is the type of things we think you need to get involved with, and we need to keep you informed about these issues. We need to get you involved in talking to your council person. Well, we had a lot of things we want to talk about feed the children, about unfound money, that all of a sudden you become parents to people before school, after school, and I don't know when we're going to start providing bedtime stories. But all those things, unfound money, all of a sudden 3 weeks ago they were broke, had no money, but all of a sudden here in council yesterday, here comes the sheriff's department with another $1 million he's ready to spend because he found some money that he didn't know was there, and all of a sudden here comes the Children's Commission with about $500,000. Here's some money we didn't know. Oh, but yes, we did know, but somehow we forgot to tell you about, and it raised a whole lot of suspicion from the council. But a lot of this, what they perceived were shenanigans went on. But we are going to be able to redistrict a lot. Sometime we'll be able to get there, and we got some exciting stuff. We're going to have a lot more next month about this JEDC that we're going to bring to you, and about more details. They've been audited by council. That report is pending, and maybe that'll be out by the time we get back. But we got to wrap up here pretty soon. We're getting close to the end, and when I mentioned the lobbyist, what I want you to know is we are, and you need to be, citizen lobbyists. We need to get you activated and motivated to take part in government and to be in contact with your council person. We'd encourage you to go to www.jackstaxpayers.org, our webpage. Look around up there. Or write me, send me an email, Tony Bates, TonyBates @juno.com, and just put in the subject help or info, and we'll send you information. We'll start putting you on a mailing list and sending you information about this and telling you how you can get involved. You need to become a citizen lobbyist, and you need to get in touch with your council people, because this is your money that they're taking from you to give to somebody else. Now, if you agree with that, then you have to support the other way, but we don't think you want to do that, and we don't think you know enough about this information, and we'll try and provide that information for you. So contact me at TonyBates@juno.com, or go to www.jackstaxpayers.org and look around our webpage there, and you'll find contact information there. Now, as we wrap up, John, anything that I want to appreciate you being here with us. Connie, thanks for your first trip to the show, and we hope you'll come back again. And John?
Oh, I'd just like to say that if you agree with me that the beaches here in Duval County are nicer than the beaches on Lake Erie, bring your business down here.
Okay.
It was like a done deal. But one person can make a difference. I know for a fact that one person can make a difference. So the more people that do call, they can make a difference.
Yeah, and you be one of those one people, so come join us and join in this effort. And we're going to have an exciting show next month, because we're going to bring you more details and more numbers and more figures about this. We've got to wrap up now. It's time to go, but look for us next month. We're going to have some exciting information for you. We'll see you next time, and thanks Connie and thanks John.